Hello, fellow book lovers, it's Elina and welcome back to my YouTube channel. I so wanted to call this video 26 in 26. Like everyone I feel is doing on BookTube, 26 books on their 2026 TBR. It sounds so cute and fun, and I decided not to participate in this trend because I did do this trend in the last year. So I did do the 25 in 25 challenge trend thing, and I did put 25 titles on my TBR for 2025. And then I actually ended up reading only 12 of those titles. And so I thought I will still make a TBR for 2026, but maybe I should lower the amount of books on there just a little bit. So welcome to my 20 in 26 video, my 2026 TBR video. Just a little side note, there are also some new releases that I am excited about to read in the new year, but I put them on a separate list. So all the books on this list have already come out, and the 2026 new releases that I'm excited about, I made a separate video on that, which I'll link down below. The first book on my TBR is Anna Karenina by Leo Tolstoy. This is a almost 1,000 page classic, I think, and I started this book in February last year, so it has been a really long time, and I got to about 50% from February all the way until August or something like that, and then I kind of soft DNF'd it. I'm not going to start over. I'm going to continue where I left off because I already soft DNF'd this book 3 or 4 years ago as well. And so I did start over last year in February, was already me starting over. And I'm not going to do it again because I do think I remember pretty much everything that happened. I just need to finish this. I really, really need to finish this. And I have wondered to myself at some point, at multiple points, actually, if I even should finish it, but I really do. I really do want to finish it. The thing with this book, I'm not loving it, but I'm liking it. And there are parts of it that I am loving. I don't know how to explain. It's just the writing style. It's very much classic writing style. So it is a bit harder to get through. I think especially for me not being a native English speaker, it might be even more difficult to get through writing like this, but I am enjoying my time with it, and I am also enjoying pushing myself to read something out of my comfort zone. I think honestly that's one of the main reasons that I really do want to finish this book, because it is out of my comfort zone and I do like to push myself every once in a while, and I do also like the feeling it gives me when I read a chapter in this that's a little bit harder to comprehend and I need to think a little bit more. I need to turn my brain on. I'm learning new words, and I think that can be a good thing. So, Anna Karenina, need to finish this year. I don't necessarily mind taking a really long time with it, but it needs to be finished at the end of the year. So that is the one and only classic that is on the list. Next up is Anxious People by Fredrik Backman. Fredrik Backman is an author that I've only ever heard great things about. I feel like every booktuber either has not read any of his books, or he's like their favorite author, or like in their top favorite authors. So I have really high expectations, which I really hope are not going to set me up for disappointments, but we'll see about that, I guess. I once was in a bookstore and I saw this book and I picked it up out of curiosity because I'd heard so much about Fredrik Backman as an author, not specifically this book, also this book, but like just him as an author in general. And so I picked up this book and I read like a random part of page 10 or something like that. I do this sometimes. I don't know if anyone else does this, but I go to bookstores and I read like a part of the book in the beginning, but not the first page. I don't know really why I do this. I feel like maybe sometimes the first page is like too much the beginning and I want to kind of know what I get into. I don't even know how to explain this, but this is a thing I do. I read like something out of like chapter 2 or 3. And so I did this with Anxious People, and I think I read like 4 sentences and I loved it so much. I loved the writing style. It made me laugh and I just read a few sentences. So I do have really high expectations for this book now, and I really hope the book can live up to that high expectation that I have of it. So in Anxious People, we follow a quite diverse set of characters, including an old woman, an old married couple, a very young married couple that is expecting their first child, and a real estate agent, because they are all at an open house for an apartment. And then a man, I think, comes into this apartment and takes them hostage. What I've heard is we follow actually like a lot of different characters, so we don't focus on the perspective of one or even a few characters. I think we really jump back and forth between a lot of major and minor characters, but that's also something I've heard said about Beartown, so now I'm actually wondering if it is true about Anxious People as well. I don't know. I haven't read the book, okay? So actually not that sure, but this is something I've heard. It doesn't necessarily even sound like a book I would have picked up if it wasn't so hyped on the internet and if it wasn't Frederick Bachman being so hyped on the internet. But it does sound interesting enough, and I just have a feeling this is going to be one of my new favorite authors. So, fingers crossed for that. And so, because Frederick Bachman is someone who I think will be one of my new favorite authors, I also put A Man Called Ove on the list, which is another one of his books. This is also one of his more popular books, I think, and has been circulating the booktube community for a while now. I don't know too much about the premise of this book, but I do know it's quite a sad book, I think, and we follow a very grumpy old man as he navigates his life. And I think, but this is partly what I've heard and partly like just general predictions, that we're gonna follow a very grumpy old man and see why he came to be this way and really understand him and understand where his grumpiness comes from. And what I've heard is that everyone who read this book ends up really, really loving him by the end of it and just feeling so deeply for this person. And I am very excited to start my Frederick Bachman journey in 2026 with these two books, but also Beartown, which I didn't put Beartown on this list because I didn't want to include another Frederick Bachman book, but I actually really wanted to read it in winter, so I put on my winter TBR, so it's kind of like, let's treat it as an honorable mention. Next up is The Women by Kristen Hanna. I read The Nightingale last year and it was my top favorite book of the year. You've probably heard me say this so many times if you've watched any of my other videos. You're probably tired of it by now. I love The Nightingale so much, and when I finished it, I decided I need to pick up more books by this author. So I decided to put The Women on my TBR for 2026, partly because this premise interested me the most. It also seemed the most similar to The Nightingale, because this also follows a war. This follows a woman as she becomes a nurse in the Vietnam War. I think it follows a lot of similar themes to The Nightingale because it also takes place in wartime and it also follows women, and it also focuses on that theme of women can be heroes. It literally says that on the back here. Women can be heroes too, which is something that was a theme in The Nightingale as well. I think the books are going to be similar enough that I'm going to love this one as well, but not so similar that it's going to feel like the same book. I've also never read about the Vietnam War. I actually hardly know anything about the Vietnam War, but I do find it an interesting topic. Maybe because I don't know anything about it. So that was The Women by Kristen Hanna. The next book I'm going to be talking about, I think I've seen this book on every single booktuber's channel at the end of 2025. And I also think I've not seen anyone rate it lower than 5 stars. That is The Will of the Many by James Islington. So at the end of 2025, the second part in this series came out, which is The Strength of the Few. And when that book came out, I feel like this book kind of got a boost or something like that. And like I said, I've just seen everyone absolutely raving about this. That's the reason I picked it up. I'm not going to pretend that I don't get influenced by other booktubers. I absolutely do. I think it's the reason for most of the books that I pick up. So The Will of the Many, the internet has convinced me. I need to try this now. So I don't know too much about the premise of this book. All that I do know is that it takes place in a sort of Roman-like fantasy world, and that it has a unique and complicated magic system where people have will, which I think is like mental as well as physical strength. And there are people that are kind of like low on the social ladder, and they have to sort of pay will to people that are higher up on the social ladder. So essentially, the more powerful you are, the more powerful you will also stay. And it connects power in the sense of your position in the world to your physical and mental strength, which I think is a very interesting thing. I also think the main character has to be a spy at some sort of academy. So that sounds interesting. I do love an academy setting, and that's pretty much all I know about it. I am very excited. I'm also very, very intimidated. It is a long book. I've heard it's a very complicated book, but I also, like I said, I heard so many good things about it. I need to try it. Next on the list is The Library Cat by Alex Howard. And this is a very, very short book. I think it's only, last time I did this on camera, I spoiled myself. Let's not do that again. It's 100 and, is this acknowledgements? Okay, well, it's about 180 pages. And it's written from the perspective of a cat. It's written from the perspective of the resident cat of the University of Edinburgh's main library. And this cat loves books. And it says it's about the meaning of life, and it says it's a little bit also about how the cat views humans. And did I mention it's from the perspective of a cat? I've never read from the perspective of a cat before. It's a short book. It's on the list. It's easy as that. It's the perspective of a cat. The next book on the list is Atmosphere by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I absolutely love Taylor Jenkins Reid. I gave almost all of the books I read by her 5 stars. I love The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. I love Daisy Jones and the Six. Those are some of my all-time favorite books, and I just trust Taylor Jenkins Reid to write a good book. I've heard nothing but phenomenal things about this. In my notes to prep for this video, I wrote down that I don't know too much about this book, but actually I started it last night, so I do know a thing or two now. I am currently on page 90 or something, I think, and I'm absolutely loving this so far. It is everything I wanted and more, everything I expected and more. We follow Joan, who has a PhD in astronomy, and she's admitted into this program that is going to train her to be a mission specialist / astronaut and go into space. And the book starts in 1984, and then we see this sort of disaster happen in space. And then it kind of cuts off halfway through the disaster, and then we go back 7 years, I think, into the past, and then we meet all the characters that are involved in this disaster, which I think is just such a clever way of telling the story, kind of showing you the high stakes and then letting you meet all the characters and then letting you love all the characters. And it's just such a mean way to write a book also, because what do you mean something bad is going to happen to these characters? And it's so clever and it's so amazing. And I knew Taylor Jenkins Reid was going to write a book that was going to get me hooked from the very first page. I don't know why I didn't pick this up last year, but I'm really, really glad I put it on the list to pick up this year, and I'm really glad I picked it up last night as well. Next up is Sunrise on the Reaping. Can you tell that I put all the books that were hyped up on the internet last year in this year's TBR? I feel like that's just the theme of today, is every book that everyone was raving about last year, I just put on the list to read this year. This was also a book I kind of meant to get to last year, but I never really did, and so that's why it's on the list. This is the prequel to the Hunger Games trilogy. This is in between the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes and the first Hunger Games book, like timeline-wise, and it follows Haymitch during the second quarter quell, or the 50th Hunger Games. I don't know much about this book other than that it was a lot of people's favorite book of last year and that it's supposedly very emotional, but I think I've said this so many times before, I really do not mind an emotional book. I actually love an emotional book. And I don't know anything actually about the plot or about Haymitch's story. I know his Hunger Games are mentioned, I think, in the second part of the original trilogy, which I did reread that last year, but I can hardly remember what was said about his games. Actually, I remember one thing. Like I said, this was so many people's favorite book of last year. It's so highly rated on Goodreads as well. and I think I'm just gonna love this. Like I said, the theme of this video is books that came out last year and everyone was raving about them. Next up is Wild Reference by Rebecca Ross. This is a prequel to the Divine Rivals books or the Letters of Enchantment duology. I loved that duology. As you can see, I have it displayed on my shelf behind me. The books are also so pretty, so don't mind if I do put them up there. Wild Reference takes place, I think, quite a while before Divine Rivals takes place in the timeline, and it doesn't follow the same characters at all, but it does take place in the same world. The romance is between Matilda, who is a goddess, and Vincent, who is a mortal. They meet in Vincent's dreams, and then Vincent also wrote a letter to Matilda during one of the darkest times of his life, whatever that means. But this letter went unanswered for a very long time, until I think 10 years later, Matilda comes tumbling into his bedroom window, or so it says in the synopsis on Goodreads. I still have a lot of questions about the plot, but I'm very excited, and I do think I trust Rebecca Ross to write a good magical love story, and I trust Book Talk and BookTube to tell me what the good books are. Next on the list is Hemlock and Silver by T. Kingfisher. And this is a Snow White retelling. Don't mind me looking down at my notes, by the way, because I wrote down like the parts of the synopsis that I felt were important to share with you. The main character, Anya, is a poison specialist, and she gets approached by the king, who is hoping that Anya can save his dying daughter, Snow. I don't often read fairy tale retellings, but it does sound like a fun thing. I am interested specifically in the poison specialist element. I think that is such a fun thing and a fun magical element to put in a book. Poisons and magical drinks and things. Potions, that was the word I was looking for. Potions. I haven't heard too much about this book, but I heard of it, and then, I don't know, the poison/potion part just spoke to me, and I put it on the list. Number 11 is Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix. I read the Harry Potter series parts 1, 2, and 3 when I was quite young, like 12 to 13-ish, I think. No, that's so incorrect, actually. I was like 15, I think. And then 2 years ago, I read Harry Potter Part 4, and then I softly NF'd Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, which is Part 5, which I don't know why I softly NF'd it. I think it was just a really, really long book. I think it's 800 or 900 pages, and sometimes you just softly NF a book and there is no really reason for it. I don't know. I can't be the only person this happens to. Sometimes you just pick up a book and you read a little bit of it, and then you pick up a different book because you do, and then you never pick up the other book again, right? And this book was not at fault, and it just happened. So I do want to pick up the book, and I will start from the beginning with this one and read this book this year, because I really do want to finish the Harry Potter series. I did watch all the movies at some point in my life, but also I practically don't remember anything of the last 3 movies. So I think it will be very interesting for me to read the story and find out what actually happens. The next book is Iron and Embers by Helene Schroer. I'm sorry. I don't know how to pronounce that. This is a first book in a romantasy series, and it sounds so good. The synopsis of this just sounds so good. Let me look at my notes again. In the synopsis, it says, an unknown form of alchemy threatens the kingdom, and now Ren, the main character, has to compete in a series of trials to win a spot at an alchemy academy to find a cure to this dark magic. It says there is sabotage from fellow competitors and an enemies to lovers plotline as well. I don't know, it's the potions and poisons element, I think, that's really speaking to me for some reason. And this just sounds like it has so many good elements of a romantasy book. It has an academy setting, it has trials, it has enemies to lovers, it has a good threatening to the kingdom. If we don't fix this, we're all gonna die. You know, that's high stakes. That's high stakes. And it sounds good. I did hear that I first need to read the Blood and Steel series, which is a series that consists of 4 primary works and I think a few novellas as well. And I am going to try to get into that series first because it is advised, I think I've heard that it is advised to read that series before you go into this series, which I didn't know when I bought the book. And I also didn't know when I put it on my 2026 TBR, but here we are. So I did download Blood and Steel on my e-reader, and I do think I'm going to try to read that book first. And if I love it, then I'm going to continue and read the whole series before I start Iron and Embers. But also, if I'm not loving the first book, then I'm just going to DNF the series and start this one. But I hope I'm going to like it though. Then we have The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches by Sangu Mandana. I hope I pronounced that correctly as well. This is a cozy fantasy, which is a genre I have really been wanting to get into. The main character is a witch called Mika, and one of the very few witches in Britain. So she has to hide her magic, and she has this online account on which she shares her witchcraft, but like she pretends it's pretend. She pretends it's pretend. You know what I mean? So I don't know. I'm imagining her being like a TikToker, influencer, doing like fun tricks, pretending it's fun tricks, but actually she's just like, it's real and she's a witch. So she gets a message and is asked to travel to Nowhere House to teach 3 young witches how to control their magic. And it says in the synopsis that there is a handsome and prickly librarian called Jamie who would do anything to protect the children and sees Mika, a stranger, as a potential threat. Like I said, I've been meaning to get into the cozy fantasy genre. I'm really curious to see if I like it or not. I hope I'm gonna like it. It sounds so fun, but also I know I can be quite critical when it comes to like silly things. So I'm also not 100% sure that the genre is for me, but I really do want to give it a try. And this one seemed the most interesting out of all the options that I laid out before myself before putting one on the list. I think it's the teaching aspect that got to me, and the children. I do love children in books and teaching. I've said this in other videos. I am studying to be a primary school teacher myself, so teaching just really speaks to me and I just love it. And so I love reading about it as well. Next up is All the Lights We Cannot See. This is a dual POV World War II historical fiction. We follow 2 characters. Marie-Laure is 12 when the war starts and she lives in France. And then we also follow another character called Werner who lives in Germany. And I think he works for the Nazis. It says their paths collide, and I'm quite curious as to how their paths collide because it isn't mentioned at all on the synopsis on the back of the book. And on Goodreads it says, the author illuminates the ways against all odds that people try to be good to one another, which really reminded me of The Nightingale by Kristen Hanna, which I mentioned multiple times in other videos, even in this video, was my favorite book of last year. And one of the elements that I liked most in The Nightingale was the way that Kristen Hanna highlighted the German soldiers' perspective and how they weren't all like the worst people ever to exist. And this quote on Goodreads kind of reminded me of that. And I hope this book is going to give me the same kind of feeling I had when I read The Nightingale. I hope this book is going to give some insight in that side of the war and why those people did the things they did and how they came to make these decisions, how they felt about these decisions. So I do think that's going to be quite an interesting read. The next 3 books that I'm going to be talking about are all fantasy books featuring dragons because I read Fourth Wing in the beginning of 2024, and that kind of started my fantasy books journey. And I was thinking about it, but I don't think I have picked up another book featuring dragons since I picked up Fourth Wing, except for A Game of Thrones. But the dragons in that book, at least as of now, where I am in the series, have such a minor role that it hardly counts. And so I decided I needed to go in search of dragon books and specifically put dragon books on my 2026 TBR because dragons are my favorite mythical creature and I love reading about dragons. The dragons in Fourth Wing absolutely made that book. without the dragons, Fourth Wing would not be Fourth Wing. And without the dragons, Fourth Wing would not be one of my all-time favorite books. And so I picked up a lot of fantasy books. Some of them were hitting, a lot of them also weren't really hitting. And I thought to myself, the dragons are missing. The dragons are missing, and I need to put more dragon books on my TBR. So here we are. I put 3 books on my TBR that I found when I went in search of dragon books. The first of these 3 is A Language of Dragons. This book takes place in London 1923. So it seems that it is a little bit of a mix between like historical fiction and fantasy, which I absolutely love. The main character is trying to get an internship studying dragon languages, which I think this is already sounding so incredible. I love a good academy setting. I've said it so many times, but I just do. And studying dragon languages is such a, oh, I love it. It's already kind of a unique approach also, I feel like, to dragons. Not that I've read a lot of dragons books. Like I said, it's Fourth Wing, and that's it. But I think it's a unique approach to dragons. And I think Vivian, the main character, accidentally starts a civil war, or at least that's what it says in the synopsis on Goodreads, but it kind of is just a little tiny part of the synopsis and it's never mentioned again. And it seemed like a big thing, so I don't know what's up with that, but it does say so. So I guess she accidentally starts a civil war. And then she's offered a job as a code breaker and has to unravel the secrets of a hidden dragon language to help the war front and save her family, who have been arrested. And it says it has a dark academia setting. It says it has a slow burn enemies to lovers romance, which I'm especially intrigued by because it doesn't say anything about a romance in the plot synopsis. It just says at the end, in the part where it's not really the synopsis anymore, but more like what people have been saying about the book, it says slow burn enemies to lovers romance. And I was like, there wasn't even a love interest in the synopsis, so who's that gonna be? So intrigued by that, and I think that's also a good thing because I do love a slow burn enemies to lovers romance or any kind of romance, but I don't love it when in a fantasy book the romance is like the main thing. Part 2 also came out on the 6th of January, I think, so I'm planning to pick this up very soon, and if I love it I can go straight into the second part, which just came out. The second book in my dragon category is To Shape a Dragon's Breath by Monachil Blackgoose. I hope I pronounced that first name correctly. For this one, actually, also, the second part comes out this month. The remote island of, impossible to pronounce, has not seen a dragon in many generations until 15-year-old Anarchus finds a dragon's egg and bonds with its hatchling. Unfortunately, the colonizers of their land have very specific ideas of how a dragon should be raised. They reluctantly let Anarchus enroll in an English dragon school, and if she doesn't succeed there, her dragon will be killed. So, high stakes there. I think this just sounds like such an interesting plot. I love a good dragon. Dragon school sounds so fun and exciting. It sounds like there's going to be some societal criticisms in there as well about colonization, which I think gives an interesting layer to the story. And I'm so excited to start this one. And the third and last book in this little mini category of dragon books is Dragonfall by L.R. Lamb. This is the first book in a duology, and this duology has also been completed already, which I like because I do like starting new series, but I also like the ability to finish up series because I have a few series I'm reading now that I'm waiting for the next book in the series to come out, and that is fun. I also do love that feeling of the whole book community being so excited when the next book in this big series comes out. That is a very fun feeling, and I love participating in that massive celebration almost. But I do think it is also fun and kind of satisfying, I guess, to finish up a series and not have to wait a year or longer in between books because I tend to forget what the books are about, which is not great. So I'm excited about starting a series and being able to finish the series within the same, let's say, year. Okay, for the synopsis, it says, humans stole the magic of dragons long ago and banished them to a dying world. Arcady, who is our main character, is a thief who lives on the streets. She steals some sort of powerful artifact, and this connects her somehow to Everin, the last male dragon. And then it says, disguised as a human, Everin soon learns that to regain his true power and form and fulfill his destiny, he only needs to convince one little thief to trust him enough to bond completely, body, mind, and soul, and then kill them. Yet, the closer they become, the greater the risk both their worlds will shatter. Yeah, what can I say? Dragons. I love dragons, and this sounded like an interesting premise. I like the fact that dragons have been banished, and I am curious to find out how humans manage to steal the magic of dragons when dragons are such powerful creatures. And it sounds interesting that she bonds to a dragon who kind of wants to kill her, I guess. I'm excited to read this book. To finish off the list, I specifically put 3 books on my TBR that are also on my physical TBR. I know I've also held up multiple physical copies before this, so there have been more books that I either put on there knowing they were already on my shelves, or I bought them after putting them on the list. But for these 3 spots that I had left on my 2026 TBR, I specifically looked at my shelves and thought, okay, these next 3 books need to be books that I already own, because that's also one of the things I'm trying to read, books from my physical TBR, like every booktuber on here, I think. I like buying books. I love buying books. And I will not stop buying books, but I also need to read the books that I bought before. So, number 18 on the list is The Book Thief by Markus Zusak. This is a historical fiction World War II story taking place in 1939 in, I think, Germany. Our main character, Liesel, lives in a foster family and she steals books from Nazi book burnings, among other places. And in the Goodreads summary, it says that her foster family hides a Jew in their basement at some point, and this kind of like upends her life as she knows it or something. What's interesting is that the Goodreads summary and the synopsis on the back of the physical book that I own have quite different things on there, and it doesn't contradict each other, but it does give us different details. So on here, it also says that the book is narrated by Death, which I think is a very interesting aspect. And it also mentions that Liesel is a 9-year-old girl, which the Goodreads summary doesn't say that. It says that she has a foster family, so it implies that she's like below 18, I guess. But her being a 9-year-old girl, I feel like, is an important part of the plot. It's a different book to read from the perspective of a child, you know? Like I said, this book is narrated by Death, which I think is a very, very interesting layer to the story. And I think I've said this in another video, which was the book haul that I did where I talked about this book. I said that I'm so curious what is going to be Death's perspective on World War II, because obviously so many people in that time are dying all at once. And I'm so curious to see if Death has an opinion on that and what his opinion on that is going to be. I feel like it could be so interesting if Death has like a expectation of how many people die in a certain time period and he is like totally unamused at the fact that now so many people are dying all at once and maybe he doesn't agree with it. I feel like that's going to be so interesting if that's the case, and I really hope that that's what we're going to get. But also maybe we don't really get his perspective on things and it's more him watching as like a sort of force from above. I don't know. So many ways the story could go, and I'm curious to find out. Then we have Almond by Won Pyong Sun. I hope I pronounced that correctly. I do not speak this language. I'm sorry. I had to take a guess and go with it. This is a literary fiction about a quite young, I think it's a high schooler. His name is Yunye. Again, I hope I pronounced this correctly. And he was born with a brain condition, which is also hard to pronounce. Alexithymia, I think. And this makes it hard for him to feel emotions like fear or anger. It says he does not have friends, but his devoted mother and grandmother provide him with a safe and contented life. But everything changes when a shocking act of random violence shatters his world, leaving him alone and on his own. It also says in the synopsis that he meets a classmate and forms a surprising bond with this classmate. And I am mainly intrigued by the brain condition part of him not being able to feel certain emotions. I think it's going to be so interesting to be in the mind of someone that has a brain that works so differently from mine. And this is the reason I want to pick up this book. So that was Almond. And the last book on today's list is The Two Loves of Sophie Strom. This is another historical fiction. This is a magical realism as well, because we follow two alternate timelines. It says, in one unforgettable night, 13-year-old Max Spiegelman's life splits in two. It is 1933 in Vienna, and Max awakes to a house fire, one he manages to escape. Orphaned and disfigured, he is adopted by an Aryan family. But then it also has this other timeline, 1933 Vienna. Max awakes a second time. This time, he and his parents flee the fire unharmed to face life as Jews in 1930s Austria. In each parallel universe, Max is haunted by visions of what could have been. But in both worlds, he shares a love with an enchanting grey-eyed girl. I'm guessing this grey-eyed girl is going to be Sophie Strom because her name is in the title but not in the back of the book, which I think is quite interesting. I think this is going to be such an interesting story. I like the aspect of the alternate timelines. I think it's going to focus a bit on World War II maybe, or maybe just the kind of events leading up to the World War, because obviously it's not accidental, like it's a conscious choice by the author that he is a Jew, and in one of the timelines he gets adopted by a non-Jewish family, and then in the other timeline he lives with his Jewish family. I'm also curious how he meets this girl in both timelines, even though his life went in such a drastically different direction. And I'm also curious because if you read the title, The Two Loves of Sophie Strom, it kind of sounds like you're going to get a perspective very focused on Sophie's life, but then the back of the book is so focused on Max. And I'm curious if we're going to get Max's perspective or maybe also Sophie's perspective. I don't know. So many things I don't know, so many things I'm curious about. This sounds so good. And I've never heard anyone talk about this in the online book community, which I do like to specifically pick up a book once in a while that isn't widely discussed online, to kind of give new recommendations to the bookish community. So I'm gonna introduce The Two Loves of Sophie Strom to the online book community, and I don't know if I'm going to introduce it as a good book or not. That is to be determined when I read it, but I am going to read it in 2026 along with the other 19 books that I talked about in this video. 20 books on the list. I really, really hope I'm going to get to all of them. I did not get to all of the books on my 2025 TBR, but there is room for change and improvement. I do hope I'm going to get to all the books on this list in the new year. So, thank you so much for watching this video. If you watch this video all the way to the end, thank you so much. And please comment what are books that you want to get to in the year 2026. I'm so excited to hear from all of you. Please do leave a comment. Please like, subscribe, and hopefully I will see you in the next one. Bye!